Some call me the Dark One. Others, the Lord of Death. To most, I am known simply as Dracula. Let's eat.
Okay, I know I might be a little bit biased, but I think this movie rules. Nick Cage is back! Let's go! This movie is awesome. I don't care what the critics are saying over on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm not biased at all, I swear. I might be a little bit biased. There isn't a Nick Cage cutout behind me. Ever since the Nick Cage Dracula photos leaked online, I was so hyped for this movie, because if there's one person who never phones it in, it's Nick Cage. He can be acting in the worst movie imaginable, but he'll always give 100%. Maybe a little bit more than that. Sometimes he acts a little bit too much. In fact, I think his biggest flaw is that he overacts. The man simply tries too hard. But in movies like this, man, it works perfectly. God, it's so good, man. When I first heard about this movie, flashbacks came to mind of his iconic role in Vampire's Kiss. In that movie, he plays a deranged lunatic who believes he's a vampire. In this movie, he's literally a vampire, but he still acts like a deranged lunatic, and it's amazing! Am I overselling this movie? Yes, I am. It's definitely not as good as I'm making it out to be. But was I entertained? Hell yes. I haven't had this much fun watching a movie until Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Damn it! Before that, it had been a while, okay? But Guardians 3 is pretty great. And I gotta say, what a treat this movie was, especially after suffering through all of Velma. I needed this movie so bad, and I'm happy I watched it. This movie stars Nicholas Hoult, Nicolas Cage, Awkwafina, Ben Schwartz, and Shohreh Aghdashloo. Let me just say, casting Nick Cage as Dracula was the best decision they could have made. This man isn't only insane on screen, behind the camera he's a little weird as well. Not too long ago, he claimed his first memory was in the womb.
Earliest memory?
In utero and feeling like I could, see faces in the dark.
You heard that right. Maybe it was the 4th of July or something, and he heard the fireworks. And it gave him pre-birth PTSD. And that's why he is the way he is. I would say overall, this movie is pretty mediocre. But whenever our boy Nick is on screen, you are bound to enjoy yourself. And it's not like he's being a goofball the entire time. There are moments when he's pretty sinister looking, but most of the time he's, doing stuff like this. This movie was directed by Chris McKay, the same man that made the Lego Batman movie, and I hear that's pretty good. I haven't seen it myself. He also made Robot Chicken and The Tomorrow War. Wasn't a big fan of The Tomorrow War. I thought it was pretty forgettable. Aesthetically, this movie looked pretty stunning at times. They were going for this haunting green look because of, vampires, and I think it worked fairly well. There are some pretty awful editing mistakes in this movie, but we'll get there. In the beginning, we're introduced to Robert Montague Renfield, the movie's protagonist. Obviously, because it's called Renfield. Renfield tells us that he's in a destructive relationship with Dracula. The movie then presents us with a flashback. The aspect ratio changes, and it temporarily turns into an old black and white film noir looking movie. I personally love the style they chose to show this flashback because it seems very reminiscent of old vampire movies. Back in the day, Renfield was a real estate lawyer who ended up becoming Dracula's assistant and familiar. And now Renfield carries out his every need. Everybody knows that Dracula's powers come from consuming human blood. Well, Renfield gets his powers by consuming bugs because he's like a less powerful version of Dracula. That part was kind of silly, but whatever. I guess when you consider everything else in the movie, it's definitely not the worst thing. It's kind of silly too because I would definitely prefer Renfield's method of gaining my powers. Gathering humans for their blood must be a massive pain in the ass. Gathering bugs, on the other hand, nobody in society would give a shit and you could do it at your leisure, and there are people out there that eat bugs, so... I mean, maybe in North America you'd be seen as a weirdo, but you could just move to China and be a vampire every day and everything's fine. And not only that, Renfield can go out in the sunlight. I would much rather be Renfield. Even though I'm not as powerful as Dracula, who cares? It's much more convenient living as a familiar of Dracula, which I think is so dumb. Why would they make his familiars better? If you pause the movie during some of Nicolas Cage's action scenes, you'll get a glimpse of his body double, and he looks nothing like Nicolas Cage. There's a part in the beginning when Dracula is being hunted by these vampire hunters. Dracula gets caught in this holy circle thing. Renfield breaks him out of it, so he turns into smoke, enters this guy's mouth, and blows him up from the inside. It's pretty gnarly. Dracula then gets hit by sunlight while killing this other guy, and this is what he looks like after the fight. Damn, bro. You've looked better. Renfield then nurses him back to life because Dracula has him by the balls, even when he looks like a little shriveled up raisin. Renfield attends these anonymous meetings for victims of abuse, and his plan is to kidnap the people that abuse the victims in these meetings and feeding them to Dracula. So it's a win-win, right? He's freeing these people of their abusers, and he's giving these abusers to Dracula. The only problem being, Dracula gets the most power out of people that are innocent and pure, like babies, virgins, nuns, and cheerleaders. Yes, even cheerleaders. A busload of them. Yeah, that's what Dracula asks for. He wants a busload of cheerleaders.
A busload of cheerleaders.
You know, there could be a girl in that bunch that slept around with the entire football team and has multiple STDs. I guess it's like eating a bag of peanuts and one of them is overcooked. You know, just throw that one away. There's this girl at the meetings that's being abused by someone named Mitch. So Renfield goes to kidnap Mitch and his buddies to bring them to Dracula. They're a bunch of scumbag drug dealers that love ska. Yeah, they really like the music genre ska. They try to make that a joke and it doesn't land at all. There's 3 guys in this room, but somehow Renfield knows immediately which one is Mitch. He shouldn't know which one is Mitch, right? I guess he just had a lucky guess. It would have been funnier, actually, if this guy wasn't Mitch, and Renfield's like, hello, Mitch. And the guy's like, what? I'm not Mitch, that's Mitch. And then Mitch, thinking that this is the hitman, goes, I'm not Mitch, that's Mitch. And they all point at each other. I don't know, I think the hitman wants to kill all 3 of them, so that might not work. Whatever, they could have done something to make it funny. How did Renfield know where these guys were located? No idea. He just found them. Okay. Mitch and the other guys hand over the drugs to Renfield because they're confusing him with a hitman that's out to kill them. Renfield then goes, what is this?
What is this?
I guess because he's confused why they're giving him all the drugs and stuff. But the way it was phrased, it made it seem like Renfield didn't know what drugs were. I know that's not what he was actually saying, but they should have changed the line, right? He should have been like, what are you doing? Instead of, what is this? Because he looks directly at the drugs and he's like, what is this?
What is this?
And instead of responding to him like, these are drugs? The guys are like, oh, you're a hitman out to kill us. So Renfield knocks these guys out one by one, but then the hitman that they were expecting shows up and starts fighting Renfield. Wait a minute, back up a second. So if Mitch and these guys were expecting a hitman, why didn't they vacate the area? Get out of there if you think you're about to die. Seems like a pretty logical thing to do, right? Why would you hang around if you knew that a hitman was on your trail? When we're first introduced to them, they're just kind of chilling, right? Listening to music, hanging out. Doesn't make much sense, does it? And this hitman guy is so goofy. Just listen to the way he speaks.
A friend of Caitlin.
Why'd they make him sound like a weird version of Batman? Or Bane, I guess. This is where the terrible editing comes in. 10 minutes and 50 seconds into this movie, right after Renfield eats some bugs and flips the hitman over, Renfield then pops up a couple feet away from the hitman out of nowhere. It's the sloppiest way I've ever seen an action scene edited in my life. That's probably not true, but it's one of them, okay? That was pretty bad. They couldn't use anything to make this look better? Pretty hard to believe. This is a pretty funny place to hold the fight, by the way. A huge warehouse full of giant statues of random stuff. Anyway, Renfield punches the hitman's head off. Just clean off, and it goes flying. You see this guy? His name is Teddy Lobo. You know how I know? Because the movie really wants us to know that his name is Teddy Lobo. Just listen to this.
You know who I am? I'm Teddy Lobo!
They make sure to tell us that he's Teddy Lobo in the most obnoxious way possible. And again, we get a very awkward transition. Renfield all of a sudden just pops up at a doorway so Teddy Lobo can get a good look at him. He was nowhere near the doorway when he punched the head off, but he's just there all of a sudden. The flow between shots in certain scenes is pretty awful. There's a fairly funny part with Teddy Lobo in this next sequence. He has a shit ton of drugs in his car, and he's about to hit a DUI checkpoint. So maybe he shouldn't have screamed his name out the window when he was driving up to it.
Teddy fucking Lobo!
But yeah, he exits the car with all the drugs in hand and he runs away and he's like, I have a prescription for this shit.
Leo, I got a prescription for doing this shit!
But yeah, what an absolute moron. Why not just cover the drugs with a jacket or something? Although the cops knew who he was, so they would just search his car. Maybe he knew that. Why not just reverse your car? That'd be better than trying to run on foot. And then we get to see current day Dracula. He's recovered a little bit since being burned alive by the sun, but not much. He looks pretty bad. The dude's seen better days. The makeup during this part is pretty great. And he reminds us that he doesn't want to eat trash. He needs pure blood, like that of a cheerleader. But he'd preferably want a busload of them. Because what's better than one cheerleader? A busload of them, obviously. And that's very simple for Renfield to pull off. You know, capturing a busload of girls, maybe a couple guys in there. They do make a joke about that in this movie, how it doesn't have to be a female cheerleader, you know? Times are changing.
Do you mean female cheerleaders?
Yeah, I'll eat boys, I'll eat girls.
What do you mean by that?
Awkwafina plays a cop named Rebecca. Her character in this movie is desperate to live up to her father's legacy. Apparently her father was a stand-up cop who pulled off some amazing achievements. He did everything by the book. He was the perfect police officer. So Awkwafina wants to prove herself by taking down the Lobo crime family. So yeah, Renfield's at a bar, and hilariously, a busload of cheerleaders arrives to hang out at this bar. Wow, okay. And then the Lobo crime family shows up, and Renfield helps Awkwafina take them out. After this, Renfield takes a liking to Rebecca. Dracula calls Renfield back to his lair, and this next part is awesome.
Why am I not embracing what I truly am?
Which is?
A god, Renfield. An immortal, insatiable, all-powerful being.
Nick Cage's acting here is so good. He plays a perfectly creepy Dracula. Renfield learns of Dracula's horrible plan to take over the world, like he didn't know that Dracula was a crazy sociopath already, but that was the last straw. Now Renfield wants to find a way out of their relationship. It's a toxic relationship. You're totally taking advantage of our friendship, Dracula. Not cool, bro. You suck. Renfield decides after the meeting that's about time. He grows to full power. There's a pretty funny part during this meeting. Renfield has a eureka moment, and he goes, "Oh my God, Dracula won't go to full power." And the guy who's hosting the meeting goes, "Wow, that was great. Why did you phrase it like that? But cool."
Stop, Lucas on his knees. What will happen?
He won't grow to full power.
Exactly. He won't grow to full power. What? That's so weird. Why would you phrase it like that? But yes, he's right.
Now it's time for Renfield to turn his life around by getting a new apartment and going to a spa and buying some new colorful clothes. Awkwafina's delivery is pretty funny in this movie at times. There's this poor cop named Kyle, and everybody tells him to shut the f up throughout the movie. Renfield brings Awkwafina flowers. Kyle says something, and this is how Awkwafina reacts.
Shut the f up, Kyle!
I'm surprised they didn't have a scene of him punching a wall, because, you know, that'd be in character for a Kyle. Teddy Lobo's mom is in charge of this crime family, and her name is Bella Francesca Lobo. She tasks her son and their goons to find and kill Renfield. They use pretty cool tech to track down his whereabouts, and it leads them to the abandoned hospital that Dracula is hiding out in. And this hospital looks pretty awesome. The way they hung all these bags of blood everywhere, the way the room is lit, it's dark and eerie, really green for some reason, but I like the color choice. This is a badass layer for Dracula to hang out in, and it definitely fits his vibe. So yeah, Dracula easily obliterates these drug dealers. There's a pretty funny exchange between Dracula and Teddy Lobo.
Teddy?
I'm Teddy Lobo.
I'm Teddy Lobo.
I am Count Dracula.
I'm Count Dracula. You win. Teddy explains to Dracula why they're there, and it angers Dracula, because he learns that Renfield is working against his wishes. So Dracula finds out where Renfield is living, so he waits for him in his apartment. This scene also rules. Nicolas Cage's acting here is so good. It's hilarious, it's creepy, it's super entertaining. He's patronizing and sarcastic with Renfield. He's treating him like an object, but also trying to manipulate him. You're a husk.
Because you're a husk!
I love when he did that. Nicolas Cage's delivery really makes this movie 1,000 times better than it has any right being. I feel like the only other actor they could have put in Nick Cage's spot that would have been just as entertaining is maybe Willem Dafoe. I'm sure there's another actor out there that would be pretty great in this role. But yeah, if it wasn't for Nick Cage, this movie would suck, plain and simple. In a strange, desperate attempt to defend himself from Dracula's verbal onslaught, Renfield picks out a book and starts reading from it. Dracula notices a sticker on the book. The sticker director leads Dracula to the place where the meetings are held. He goes there to bring an end to the people that are having an impact on Renfield's point of view. Dracula's entrance into this meeting is awesome. He looks very fancy. Look at that top hat and his cane. Very nice. Bloodborne vibes, Bloodborne vibes. Shit! I told you guys that I wouldn't mention that game anymore. It's hard, okay? It's been my entire life for a while. Dracula rises into the air. He tells them all his name.
I am Dracula.
And then he goes, "Let's eat."
Let's eat.
And this next part is brutal. He kills everybody in the room in a matter of milliseconds. I love the way Nicolas Cage decided to make Dracula sound in this movie. I'm guessing the director had some say in his delivery, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was like, "All right, Nick, you're a vampire. Pretend to be a vampire. Now go." Because honestly, with Nicolas Cage, that's probably the best way you can go about making a movie with him, because I feel like if you have too much control over how he acts, then that's when you get the worst performances out of him. You gotta let this guy run wild. There are exceptions, I'm sure. Like in the movie Mandy, I'm sure Panos Cosmatos really did everything in his power to get the best performance he possibly could have, Nick, because holy shit, Nick's acting in that movie is next level. But for the most part, if you want an entertaining Nick Cage performance, you just let him go crazy, you know? So yeah, Renfield is a little bit upset watching all of his friends get killed before his eyes. Rebecca arrives at the scene, finds him standing over 1,000 dead bodies, doesn't really ask any questions about how he did this because he doesn't have a weapon on him. So it looks like he just ripped them all apart with his bare hands, which obviously wouldn't make much sense, right? How could anybody realistically do this? It's not really possible, is it? Unless these people wanted to die and they just stood there and asked him to do this. Even then, it would take a lot of strength and power to be able to rip people apart like this with your bare hands. But I guess the cops don't care about any of that. They're like, "Oh my God, Renfield must have done this. Let's arrest him." But the cops don't really care about any of that. Obviously, they should arrest him because he's the only guy standing there in a room full of dead bodies. But the investigation doesn't go much further than that, which is pretty stupid. The Lobos have the cops in their back pocket. So they work together to corner Aquafina, who has Renfield in her car, because the cops want to hand over Renfield to the Lobos. So they corner Rebecca's car to take Renfield in. They even offer Rebecca a promotion. You get better pay, a better parking spot, Kyle's parking spot. And then Kyle's like, "Hey," and they're like, "Fuck you, Kyle."
Hey, you, Kyle.
I know that they're cheap attempts at a laugh, okay, but they work on me. I'm a simple guy. Also, this is a very strange way for the cops and the Lobos to get what they want, right? This whole thing where they try to convince Rebecca to hand over Renfield, it just makes no sense to me because there's a much easier solution to this. I get that the Lobos want to get Renfield as soon as possible, but it's already nighttime. Rebecca has to sleep at some point. Just wait for her to bring him to the station and then hand him over. Like, what? Now, I know that Rebecca wants to live up to her father, and her father was not a corrupt cop. He was a very virtuous man. He always did what was right. And the cops know this, right? Why would they not expect that trying to corrupt Rebecca would be kind of a hard task? She's proved to be very hard-headed in the past. She wouldn't just turn her back on everything she believed in for a better parking spot and a little promotion. And the cops should have known this. But yeah, Rebecca is completely suicidal. She's a maniac. She shoots a power line and drives away with 100 guns pointing at her, which leads me to ask, why does this girl care so much about this guy who she just thinks killed a bunch of innocent people? Who gives a shit about Renfield? Hand him over. Who cares if the cops get him or if the Lobos get him? This guy's a piece of shit. Arguably, he's worse than the Lobos, right? Why would you risk your life for this guy that you think just murdered a bunch of innocent people? She doesn't like the Lobos because the Lobos killed her father, okay? That's the big thing. But still, which makes it even more insane that the cops would think that she would be okay with this. There's another pretty funny moment between Freddy Lobo and Dracula. Dracula starts laughing maniacally after making a proposal to work together. And Freddy has a hilarious reply. "Are you happy or are you gonna fuck me up?"
Are you happy or are you gonna fuck me up?
Knowing that she's being pursued by the cops and the Lobo crime family, where does Rebecca bring Renfield? That's right, her own apartment. Where else would she go? So obviously these men show up to try and apprehend them. And thus a battle ensues between Rebecca, Renfield, and these men. And there's a bunch of them, and they're all wearing armor, and they all have guns. Renfield shouldn't have a problem, you know, because he's part vampire. But Rebecca? Yeah, she should have definitely been killed during this firefight. Renfield does some pretty hilarious shit during this this part. He rips the arms off this one guy, then uses them to fight off other men. He then throws them like javelins at two other guys that are fighting Rebecca. He rips off one dude's face. Is that a face-off reference? You know, because of Nick Cage?
His face.
Maybe. So yeah, it's obviously not very believable, but it's a pretty amazing fight scene nonetheless. Rebecca's plot armor is insane, but it is what it is. Renfield and Rebecca ready themselves to fight Dracula and the Lobos, because they have Rebecca's sister captive. Yeah, Rebecca's sister is a thing in this movie, but she has hardly any screen time, which is a pretty poor decision, I think. If you're gonna make a character become captive in a movie, you're gonna want the audience to like that character, at the very least, know who that character is, whatever. I don't even know her name. Let me see. Oh, apparently her name's Kate. I had to go on IMDb to find that out. Later, we learned that Dracula had turned pretty much the entire Lobo crime family into familiars, aside from Bella Francesca. There's a part when Freddy sniffs a centipede up his nose, and it's pretty gnarly. You know, because he's a familiar now. He has to eat bugs to get his power. I guess Dracula put all these guys in a room, and he was like, all right, now drink my blood, everybody. And listen up. You're all gonna wanna eat bugs now. That's how you get your powers. I know it might be kind of gross, but you better get used to it within the next, I don't know, hour or two. This Freddy guy literally just became a familiar, and he's immediately okay with sniffing a centipede up his nose? That's pretty crazy. This guy isn't all that normal. So Freddy and Renfield fight. Renfield eats a bug, then literally kicks the shit out of Freddy. Yeah, literally. Dracula manipulates Rebecca into joining him as long as he heals her sister. For some reason, Dracula insists on staying in this hallway where blinds can open up and the sun will shine in. So that's pretty stupid. And guess what happens? Rebecca presses a switch that opens the blinds. I don't know how she knew where the switch was and what it was used for. Lucky guess, I suppose. So Dracula is burned and he flies away. Guess how they end up defeating Dracula? In the dumbest way possible. I hate this part. They couldn't be more clever than this? Whatever. Okay, let me tell you how. Remember how in the beginning of the movie, Dracula was caught in that protection circle? Well, Rebecca had read how to make a protection circle off of Wiccan Tumblr.
I got the instructions off of Wiccan Tumblr.
Yeah, Wiccan Tumblr. And she used coke to draw the circle. They kicked the shit out of Dracula. Not literally this time, but definitely figuratively. They use everything in their disposal on Dracula. They end up burning him into an ash. They put his ash into cement cubes and then dump them in the sewer. So yeah, that's the end of Dracula. It would be pretty hilarious if they made a sequel to this movie and somehow he found a way out of these cement cubes. At the very end of this movie, Renfield uses Dracula blood to bring back to life everybody Dracula killed at the meeting. Remember when Rebecca found Renfield there? Yeah, I guess they just left all the bodies sitting in this gymnasium for however long, you know. Some time had passed since then. Maybe they revived them all from the morgue. As far as their families that were informed of their deaths, who cares about them? So yeah, pretty silly movie. Obviously, it's not perfect. It's nowhere near perfect. If it weren't for Nick Cage, I would go as far as to say this movie is bad. But at the end of the day, movies are meant to entertain. I had a blast watching this. I'd probably give it like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, but obviously I'm biased. Most people probably give it a 5 or something. Either way, that's my review of Renfield. Will I watch this movie again? Hell yeah. Yes, I will. It's a good time, man. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you'd like me to review next in the comment section down below. Thank you so much to all my patrons that make videos like this possible. Here are all the names of all these beautiful people who support me. I love you guys so much. If you haven't already, please go check out alienclothing.com. We have a bunch of amazing new designs over there, including this shirt, which is sick as hell. Use code RENFIELD at checkout to get 15% off your order. This discount will only be active for 48 hours, so use it while you still can. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.